About 541 million years ago, a major part of Earth's history began and ended around 485 million years ago, the Cambrian Period. During this time, conditions on Earth were different from today. The land areas had no plants or animals, while most life existed in the oceans. In the oceans, many organisms began to develop more complex body structures. Earlier life forms were mostly simple, but during this period, organisms showed clear shapes, body segments, and protective features, such as shells and hard coverings. These changes allowed different types of organisms to exist and survive in a wider range of environments. This period is known for a rapid increase in the number and variety of living organisms, an event called the Cambrian Explosion. During this time, many major groups of animals first appeared in the fossil record. Organisms also developed new features such as early eyes, limbs, and feeding structures. The Cambrian Period holds a very important position in the long history of the Earth. It belongs to a much larger span of time known as the Paleozoic era, which is one of the major divisions of Earth's past. To understand where the Cambrian Period fits, it is necessary to look at the structure of Earth's timeline. Scientists divide the history of the Earth into very large sections called eons. Each eon is divided into eras, each era into periods, and each period into smaller units called epochs and ages. This system helps scientists organize the long and complex story of the planet in a clear and structured way. The Cambrian Period began about 541 million years ago and lasted until about 485 million years ago. This means it covered a span of more than 50 million years. It came after the end of the Precambrian time, which includes the Hadean, Archean, and Proterozoic eons. The Cambrian Period marks the beginning of the Phanerozoic eon, which is the current eon and includes all the time when life has been visible in the fossil record in large and complex forms. Before the Cambrian Period, life already existed on Earth, but it was mostly simple. Most living things were microscopic, meaning they were too small to be seen without special tools. These early forms of life included bacteria and simple algae. Toward the end of the time before the Cambrian, more complex life began to appear. Some of these organisms had soft bodies and left behind limited fossil evidence because soft tissues do not preserve easily. These organisms are often grouped into what scientists call the Ediacaran biota, which lived during the last part of the Proterozoic eon. The beginning of the Cambrian Period is marked by a major change in the fossil record. At this point, many organisms with hard body parts begin to appear. Hard parts such as shells and exoskeletons are more likely to be preserved in rock, which makes them easier for scientists to study. This sudden increase in the number and variety of fossils is one of the reasons why the Cambrian Period is so well known. The Cambrian Period is often associated with a rapid increase in the diversity of life. During this time, many major groups of animals first appeared. These include groups that still exist today, such as arthropods, mollusks, and chordates. Arthropods include animals like insects, spiders, and crustaceans. Mollusks include animals like snails, clams, and squids. Chordates include animals that have a structure that later develops into a backbone, and this group includes vertebrates such as fish, birds, and mammals. At the start of the Cambrian Period, the Earth's continents were arranged very differently from today. Most of the land was grouped into large landmasses located near the equator. There were also smaller landmasses spread around the globe. The climate during this time was generally warm, and there was little or no ice at the poles. Sea levels were high, and large shallow seas covered many parts of the continents. These shallow seas provided ideal conditions for marine life to grow and spread. The oceans of the Cambrian period were the main environment where life developed. There was very little life on land at this time. The oceans were rich in minerals and nutrients, which supported a wide range of organisms. Many of these organisms lived on or near the sea floor, while others swam in the water above. One of the important developments during the Cambrian period was the appearance of complex ecosystems. An ecosystem is a system where living organisms interact with each other and with their environment. In the Cambrian seas, different types of organisms played different roles. Some organisms were producers, such as algae, which used sunlight to make food through photosynthesis. Other organisms were consumers, which fed on producers or on other consumers. There were also organisms that broke down dead material and recycled nutrients back into the environment. The appearance of predators during the Cambrian period is another important feature. Predators are organisms that hunt and eat other organisms. Before this time, most life forms were simple and did not have strong defenses or advanced methods of movement. During the Cambrian period, many organisms developed features such as hard shells, sharp spines, and better ways of moving. These features helped them avoid being eaten or helped them catch prey. The development of eyes and other sensory organs also took place during the Cambrian period. These features allowed organisms to detect light, movement, and other changes in their environment. This made it easier for them to find food and avoid danger. The evolution of these features shows that life was becoming more complex and more capable of interacting with its surroundings in advanced ways. The fossil record from the Cambrian period provides a detailed view of life at that time. One of the most famous fossil sites from this period is the Burgess Shale in what is now Canada. This site preserves a wide variety of soft-bodied organisms, giving scientists a rare look at creatures that would not normally fossilize. These fossils show that Cambrian life was not only diverse, but also included many unusual and complex forms. Another important fossil site is the Chengjiang fossil site in what is now China. Like the Burgess Shale, it contains well-preserved fossils of many different types of organisms. These sites help scientists understand the structure of Cambrian ecosystems and the relationships between different organisms. The rocks from the Cambrian period are found all over the world. These rocks often contain fossils that help scientists determine their age and the conditions in which they were formed. By studying these rocks, scientists can learn about the climate, sea levels, and other environmental factors of the time. The chemical composition of the oceans during the Cambrian period also played a role in the development of life. Changes in the levels of oxygen and other elements in the water may have supported the growth of more complex organisms. Higher levels of oxygen in the oceans and atmosphere would have allowed larger and more active organisms to survive. The Cambrian period is also important because it sets the stage for later developments in Earth's history. The groups of organisms that appeared during this time continued to evolve and diversify in the following periods. The structure of ecosystems became more complex, and new forms of life continued to emerge. The boundary between the Cambrian period and the period that follows it, the Ordovician period, is marked by changes in the types of fossils found in the rock record. These changes reflect shifts in the environment and in the types of organisms that were present. The end of the Cambrian period did not involve a major mass extinction, but there were changes in sea levels and climate that affected life. The study of the Cambrian period helps scientists understand how complex life developed on Earth. By examining fossils, rock layers, and chemical evidence, scientists can piece together a picture of what the world was like during this time. This information also helps scientists understand how life responds to changes in the environment. The position of the Cambrian period in Earth's timeline makes it a key point of reference. It marks the transition from a world dominated by simple life forms to a world where complex organisms became common. This transition is one of the most important events in the history of life. The Cambrian period is part of a sequence of periods that together make up the Paleozoic era. After the Cambrian comes the Ordovician, followed by the Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous and Permian periods. Each of these periods has its own characteristics and important events, but the Cambrian stands out because of the major changes that took place at its beginning. The time before the Cambrian period is often referred to as deep time, because it represents such a long span of Earth's history. During this time, the Earth formed, the first oceans developed, and the earliest life appeared. By the time the Cambrian period began, the planet had already gone through many changes, including shifts in climate, the formation and breakup of continents, and changes in the composition of the atmosphere. The start of the Cambrian period is defined by a specific point in the rock record. Scientists use the first appearance of certain types of fossils to mark this boundary. One of the key indicators is the appearance of trace fossils, which are marks left by the movement of organisms in sediment. These traces show that organisms were becoming more active and were interacting with their environment in new ways. The Cambrian period also shows evidence of increased biological activity in the form of burrowing and movement in the sea floor. This activity changed the structure of the sediment and affected the distribution of nutrients. These changes had an impact on the types of organisms that could live in these environments. As the Cambrian period progressed, the diversity of life continued to increase. New species appeared and existing groups became more varied. This increase in diversity is reflected in the fossil record, which shows a wide range of body shapes, sizes, and structures. The study of the Cambrian period is not limited to fossils. Scientists also use other methods to learn about this time. These methods include the study of isotopes, which are different forms of elements that can provide information about past environments. By analyzing isotopes in rocks, scientists can learn about temperatures, ocean chemistry, and other factors. Plate tectonics also played a role during the Cambrian period. The movement of Earth's crust affected the position of continents and the formation of ocean basins. These changes influenced ocean currents, climate, and the distribution of life. The arrangement of land and sea during the Cambrian period created a variety of habitats, which supported the growth of diverse ecosystems. Volcanic activity was another factor that influenced the environment during the Cambrian period. Volcanic eruptions can release gases and minerals into the atmosphere and oceans. These materials can affect climate and provide nutrients that support life. Evidence of volcanic activity can be found in the rock record from this time. The Cambrian period represents a time when life began to take on forms that are more familiar today. While many Cambrian organisms are now extinct, the basic body plans that appeared during this time are still present in modern animals. This makes the Cambrian period an important point in the study of evolution. The conditions that allowed for the development of complex life during the Cambrian period are still being studied. Scientists continue to investigate the factors that led to the increase in diversity and complexity. These factors may include changes in the environment, genetic developments, and interactions between organisms. The Cambrian period provides a detailed record of early animal life and the conditions in which it developed. By studying this period, scientists gain insight into the processes that shape life on Earth. The information gathered from Cambrian rocks and fossils contributes to a broader understanding of biology, geology, and the history of the planet. Throughout the Cambrian period, the Earth continued to change. Sea levels rose and fell, climates shifted, and life adapted to new conditions. The time range of the Cambrian period is one of the most important parts of understanding Earth's early history, because it marks a clearly defined stretch of time during which major changes in life and environmental conditions took place. The Cambrian period belongs to a larger division of geological time known as the Paleozoic era, which itself is part of the even larger span called the Phanerozoic eon. When scientists describe the time range of the Cambrian period, they are referring to the specific interval in Earth's long history, when this period began and when it ended, as well as how long it lasted in total. The Cambrian period began approximately 541 million years ago. This starting point is not chosen randomly. It is based on detailed scientific study of rock layers found in different parts of the world. These rock layers contain fossils, which are preserved remains or traces of ancient life. Scientists examine these fossils carefully and look for clear changes in the types of organisms that appear in the record. At around 541 million years ago, there is a noticeable shift in the fossil record. Before this time, most life forms were simple, small and soft-bodied, and they are often difficult to preserve in rocks. After this time, there is a rapid increase in the number and variety of organisms that have hard parts such as shells and exoskeletons, which are more easily preserved. This clear appearance of many new types of organisms is one of the main reasons why the beginning of the Cambrian period is set at this point in time. Scientists use a method called radiometric dating to determine the ages of rock layers. This method involves measuring the decay of certain radioactive elements within the rocks. By using this technique, they can assign approximate ages to different layers and match them across regions. Through many years of research and repeated testing, the starting point of the Cambrian period has been refined and agreed upon as about 541 million years ago. The Cambrian period did not last forever. It came to an end approximately 485 million years ago. This ending point is also determined through careful observation of changes in rock layers and fossil records. As scientists move upward through layers of rock that were formed after the Cambrian period, they begin to see new types of organisms that were not present before, as well as changes in the environment and the distribution of life. These changes mark the transition into the next period of geological time, known as the Ordovician period. To understand the duration of the Cambrian period, it is necessary to calculate the difference between its starting point and its ending point. If the Cambrian period began about 541 million years ago and ended about 485 million years ago, then its total duration was approximately 56 million years. This means that the Cambrian period lasted for about 56 million years, which is a long span of time by human standards, but only a small fraction of Earth's entire history. During this span of about 56 million years, many important developments took place. The time range itself provides a framework that helps scientists organize these developments in a logical order. Without a clearly defined time range, it would be difficult to understand when certain events happened or how they relate to one another. The beginning and end of the Cambrian period act as boundaries that contain a sequence of changes in life, climate, and geology. The early part of the Cambrian period, shortly after its beginning, at around 541 million years ago, was a time when life in the oceans began to increase in complexity and diversity. Although life had existed before this time, it was mostly simple and limited in form. As the Cambrian period progressed, more complex body structures appeared, including organisms with segmented bodies, limbs and protective coverings. These changes did not happen all at once, but unfolded gradually over millions of years within the time range of the Cambrian period. The middle portion of the Cambrian period continued to show growth in the variety of life forms. Different groups of organisms spread into various marine environments. Some lived on the ocean floor while others moved through the water. The presence of hard parts such as shells made it easier for these organisms to be preserved in the fossil record, which is why the Cambrian period is so well known for its rich collection of fossils. As the Cambrian period moved closer to its end around 485 million years ago, further changes in life and the environment became noticeable. Some groups of organisms became more dominant, while others declined. The conditions in the oceans and on the continents also continued to change, influenced by factors such as the movement of land masses and variations in sea levels. These changes set the stage for the transition into the next period. The time range of the Cambrian period is not only defined by its beginning and end, but also by how it fits within the larger structure of geological time. The Paleozoic era, which includes the Cambrian period, is divided into several periods, each with its own time range and characteristics. The Cambrian period is the first of these periods, meaning it marks the beginning of the Paleozoic era. This placement gives it special importance because it represents the starting point of a long sequence of changes that would continue through later periods. Geologists and paleontologists use a standardized system called the geologic time scale to organize Earth's history. This system divides time into eons, eras, periods, and smaller units. The Cambrian period is one of these units, and its time range is carefully defined within this system. The boundaries of the Cambrian period are recognized worldwide, even though the exact rock formations and fossil types may differ from one location to another. This global agreement allows scientists from different regions to communicate clearly about the timing of events. The determination of the Cambrian period's time range has improved over time as new data and methods have become available. Early scientists did not have access to precise dating techniques, so their estimates of geological time were less accurate. As radiometric dating methods were developed and refined, it became possible to assign more precise ages to rock layers. This led to adjustments in the estimated start and end points of the Cambrian period. The current values of about 541 million years ago for the beginning and about 485 million years ago for the end are based on the best available evidence. The duration of about 56 million years may seem very long, but in the context of Earth's history, which spans over 4 billion years, it represents a relatively small portion. However, the importance of the Cambrian period is not determined by its length alone. Its significance comes from the major changes that occurred during this time, especially in the development of life. The defined time range allows scientists to focus on this interval and study it in detail. Within the time range of the Cambrian period, scientists have identified smaller divisions known as stages or series. These subdivisions help to organize the period into shorter intervals, making it easier to study changes that occurred over shorter spans of time. Each of these subdivisions has its own characteristics and fossil assemblages. By examining these smaller intervals, scientists can track the progression of changes more precisely within the overall duration of the Cambrian period. The boundaries of the Cambrian period are marked by specific points in the rock record, known as Global Boundary Stratotype Section and points. These are physical locations where the boundary between two periods is clearly defined and can be studied. The beginning of the Cambrian period is marked by the first appearance of certain trace fossils that indicate more complex animal behavior. The end of the Cambrian period is marked by changes in fossil assemblages that signal the transition to the Ordovician period. The time range of the Cambrian period also reflects changes in Earth's environment. During this interval, the arrangement of continents was different from what it is today. Large landmasses were positioned in the various parts of the globe, and sea levels were generally high. This meant that much of the Earth's surface was covered by shallow seas, which provided ideal conditions for marine life to develop and diversify. These environmental conditions are closely tied to the time range because they changed gradually over the course of the period. The duration of the Cambrian period provides enough time for gradual processes to occur. Evolutionary changes, for example, do not happen instantly. They require long periods during which small changes accumulate. The span of about 56 million years allowed for the development of many new forms of life, as well as the establishment of ecological relationships among different organisms. These processes are best understood when placed within the context of the defined time range. In addition to biological changes, geological processes also took place during the Cambrian period. The movement of tectonic plates, the formation of sedimentary rock layers, and the changes in sea levels all occurred within this time range. These processes left physical evidence in the form of rock formations that can be studied today. By analyzing these rocks, scientists can learn about the conditions that existed during different parts of the Cambrian period. The concept of time range is essential for understanding how different events are connected. For the Cambrian period, knowing that it lasted from about 541 million years ago to about 485 million years ago, allows scientists to place it in relation to other periods. It comes after the late Neoproterozoic time and before the Ordovician period. This sequence helps to build a continuous timeline of Earth's history. The study of the Cambrian period's duration also involves comparing data from different regions of the world. Rock layers from one location can be matched with those from another location based on similarities in fossils and composition. This process, known as correlation, helps to confirm that the time range is consistent across different parts of the Earth. Even though local conditions may vary, the overall time frame remains the same. The precision of the Cambrian period's time range continues to improve as new research is conducted. Advances in technology allow scientists to measure the ages of rocks with greater accuracy. New fossil discoveries also provide additional information about the timing of evolutionary events. As a result, the boundaries of the Cambrian period may be refined further in the future, although the general range is already well established. The importance of the Cambrian period's time range extends beyond geology and paleontology. It also has relevance for other fields such as biology, chemistry, and environmental science. By understanding when certain developments occurred, scientists can explore the factors that influenced them. For example, changes in the composition of the atmosphere and oceans during the Cambrian period may have played a role in the development of new forms of life. These changes are studied within the context of the period's duration. The time range of the Cambrian period serves as a framework for organizing a vast amount of information. Without this framework, it would be difficult to make sense of the complex history of life and the Earth's surface. The clearly defined beginning and end points provide reference markers that allow scientists to divide this history into manageable sections. At the beginning of the Cambrian period, the Earth was already very old, and it had passed through many long phases of change that shaped its surface, its oceans, and its atmosphere. The conditions that existed at that time were not sudden or accidental. They were the result of a long sequence of geological events that had taken place during the earlier part of Earth's history. especially during the time known as the late Precambrian. By the time the Cambrian began, the planet had reached a stage where its outer layer, its oceans and its climate, had settled into patterns that allowed new forms of life to appear and grow in greater variety. The solid outer layer of the Earth, known as the crust, had already been divided into large pieces called continental plates. These plates were not fixed in place. They were slowly moving across the surface of the planet, driven by forces deep within the Earth. At the start of the Cambrian, the arrangement of these continental plates was very different from what exists today. Instead of the familiar continents seen in the present time, the land was grouped into several large masses and smaller fragments. One of the largest landmasses at that time was known as Gondwana, which included regions that would later become parts of Africa, South America, Antarctica, Australia, and India. This large landmass was located mostly in the southern part of the planet. Other smaller landmasses were scattered across different parts of the globe. These included areas that would later become parts of North America, Europe, and Asia. These pieces of land were separated by wide oceans. The arrangement of these landmasses played an important role in shaping the climate, ocean currents, and the distribution of sediments across the Earth's surface. The oceans at the beginning of the Cambrian covered a large portion of the Earth. In many areas, shallow seas spread across the edges of the continents. These shallow marine environments were especially important because they allowed sunlight to reach the seafloor, creating conditions that supported the growth of early life forms. The presence of these shallow seas was linked to relatively high sea levels during this time. When sea levels are high, large areas of continental crust become submerged underwater, forming wide, shallow marine environments. The composition of the ocean water was also an important factor during this time. The oceans contained dissolved minerals that had been carried into them by rivers and by chemical processes taking place on land. Calcium and carbonate ions were present in significant amounts, allowing certain organisms to form hard shells and skeletons. This marked an important change from earlier times when most life forms did not have hard body parts. The ability to form shells and skeletons had a strong connection to the chemical conditions of the oceans. The atmosphere at the start of the Cambrian was different from the atmosphere of earlier periods. Over time, the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere had increased due to the activity of photosynthetic organisms such as cyanobacteria and early algae. These organisms used sunlight to produce energy, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This process had been taking place for a very long time before the Cambrian, and it gradually raised the oxygen levels in the air and in the oceans. By the beginning of the Cambrian, oxygen levels had reached a point where they could support more complex forms of life. Oxygen is essential for many biological processes, especially for organisms that require higher energy levels. The increase in oxygen allowed for the development of larger and more active organisms. It also made it possible for organisms to develop more complex body structures. The climate during the early Cambrian was generally warmer than in some earlier periods. Evidence from geological records suggests that there were no large ice sheets covering the continents at that time. This means that the Earth was in a relatively warm state, with stable temperatures that supported marine life. Warm conditions also helped maintain high sea levels, which contributed to the widespread shallow seas. The surface of the continents at the start of the Cambrian was mostly barren. There were no forests, no grasses, and no complex land plants as seen today. The land was made up of exposed rock and soil, shaped by weathering processes such as wind and water erosion. Rivers carried sediments from the land into the oceans, where these materials settled and formed layers on the seafloor. Over time, these layers would become sedimentary rocks. These sedimentary rocks provide important evidence about the conditions that existed during the Cambrian. Many of them contain fossils of early life forms, as well as structures that show how sediments were deposited. The types of sediments found in these rocks can tell scientists about the environment in which they formed. For example, fine-grained sediments often indicate calm water conditions, while coarser materials suggest stronger currents or wave activity. Tectonic activity was also an important part of the geological conditions at the start of the Cambrian. The movement of continental plates caused the formation of mountain ranges, volcanic activity, and the opening and closing of ocean basins. These processes influenced the distribution of land and sea, as well as the chemical composition of the oceans and atmosphere. Volcanic activity released gases into the atmosphere, including carbon dioxide, which played a role in regulating the climate. The interaction between the atmosphere, oceans, and solid Earth created a complex system that shaped the environment. Changes in one part of this system often affected the others. For example, an increase in volcanic activity could lead to higher levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which could influence temperature and ocean chemistry. Similarly, changes in ocean circulation could affect the distribution of oxygen and nutrients, which in turn could influence the development of life. The seafloor at the beginning of the Cambrian was not uniform. It included a variety of environments, such as shallow continental shelves, deeper basins, and areas near underwater volcanic activity. Each of these environments had its own set of conditions, including differences in temperature, pressure, light availability, and chemical composition. These differences created a range of habitats that could support different types of organisms. In shallow marine areas, sunlight could reach the seafloor, allowing photosynthetic organisms to grow. These organisms formed the base of the food chain, providing energy for other life forms. In deeper areas where sunlight could not reach, life depended on organic material that sank from the surface or on chemical processes occurring near hydrothermal vents. These vents released mineral-rich fluids from beneath the Earth's crust, creating unique environments that supported specialized forms of life. The chemical conditions of the oceans were also influenced by the interaction between seawater and the oceanic crust. At mid-ocean ridges where new crust was being formed, seawater circulated through hot rock, undergoing chemical changes before returning to the ocean. This process contributed to the overall composition of seawater and affected the availability of certain elements. The presence of dissolved oxygen in the oceans was not uniform. In some areas, especially in deeper waters, oxygen levels may have been lower. This created zones where only certain types of organisms could survive. The distribution of oxygen in the oceans was influenced by factors such as temperature, circulation patterns, and biological activity. Sedimentation during the early Cambrian played a key role in preserving evidence of life and environmental conditions. As organisms lived and died, their remains were often buried by sediments. Over time, these remains could become fossilized, providing a record of the types of life that existed and the environments in which they lived. The rapid burial of organisms was especially important for preserving soft-bodied forms, which are less likely to be preserved under normal conditions. The mineral content of sediments also influenced the types of rocks that formed. In areas where calcium carbonate was abundant, limestone deposits were common. In other areas, different types of sediments formed rocks such as shale and sandstone. These rocks provide important information about the conditions of the early Cambrian, including water depth, energy levels, and chemical composition. The geological conditions at the start of the Cambrian were also influenced by earlier events, including periods of widespread glaciation that occurred during the late Precambrian. These glacial events had covered large parts of the Earth with ice, and their end marked a significant change in climate. As the ice melted, sea levels rose, and new marine environments were created. The melting of ice also released large amounts of fresh water and sediments into the oceans, affecting their composition. The transition from these earlier conditions to the environment of the Cambrian involved changes in temperature, sea level, and chemical composition. These changes created new opportunities for life to develop and expand. The increase in oxygen levels, the availability of nutrients, and the presence of diverse habitats all contributed to the conditions that allowed for the growth of early animal life. The structure of the Earth's crust at this time included both continental and oceanic regions. Continental crust is generally thicker and less dense than oceanic crust, and it forms the landmasses of the Earth. Oceanic crust is thinner and denser, forming the floor of the oceans. The interaction between these two types of crust played a role in shaping the surface of the planet, including the formation of mountain ranges and ocean basins. Subduction zones where one plate moves beneath another were active during this time. These zones are associated with volcanic activity and the formation of deep ocean trenches. The movement of plates at these boundaries contributed to the recycling of materials within the Earth, influencing both the crust and the mantle. The mantle, located beneath the crust, was also an important part of the geological system. Convection currents within the mantle drove the movement of tectonic plates. These currents were caused by heat from the Earth's interior, which created a slow but continuous flow of material. This movement influenced the position of continents and the formation of geological features. The heat within the Earth also played a role in volcanic activity. Volcanoes released molten rock, ash, and gases to the surface, contributing to the formation of new crust and the alteration of existing landforms. The gases released by volcanoes, including carbon dioxide and water vapor, affected the composition of the atmosphere and played a role in climate regulation. The interaction between geological processes and environmental conditions created a dynamic and constantly changing world at the start of the Cambrian. The distribution of land and sea, the composition of the atmosphere and oceans, and the activity within the Earth all work together to shape the conditions of the time. The absence of complex life on land meant that geological processes, such as erosion and weathering, operated without the influence of plants. This allowed for the rapid breakdown of rocks and the transport of sediments into the oceans. These sediments provided the materials needed for the formation of sedimentary rocks and also influenced the chemistry of the oceans. The early Cambrian environment was marked by a balance between stability and change. While certain conditions, such as warm temperatures and high sea levels, remained relatively consistent, other aspects, such as tectonic activity and ocean chemistry, continued to evolve. This combination of factors created an environment that was capable of supporting the development of new forms of life. The breakup of ancient supercontinents during the Cambrian period was a slow and detailed process that involved many parts of the Earth working together over a long stretch of time. During this period, the surface of the Earth was not fixed in place. Instead, it was made up of large pieces called tectonic plates that moved gradually over the softer layer beneath them. These movements shaped the positions of continents and oceans and had a strong influence on the environment, the climate, and the development of life in the seas. At the beginning of the Cambrian period, the Earth already had a long geological history behind it. Before this time, several large landmasses had come together to form supercontinents. One of the most important of these was a massive landmass known as Rodinia, which had formed many hundreds of millions of years earlier. Over time, Rodinia began to break apart due to forces deep within the Earth. Heat from the planet's interior caused material in the mantle to move slowly in circular patterns. These movements created pressure on the crust above, leading to stretching, cracking, and eventual separation of the land. As Rodinia broke apart, it did not disappear all at once. Instead, it separated into several smaller continental blocks. These blocks continued to move away from each other over millions of years. By the time the Cambrian period began, the process of breakup was already well underway, and the continents were arranged in a way that was very different from today. The fragments of Rodinia were scattered across the globe, forming new oceans between them. One of the major results of this breakup was the formation of new ocean basins. When a continent splits, the crust becomes thinner in the region where the separation occurs. Eventually, molten material from beneath rises to fill the gap, cools, and forms new oceanic crust. This process creates a new ocean that slowly widens as the continents continue to drift apart. During the Cambrian period, several such oceans were forming and expanding, changing the shape of the Earth's surface. The continents during this time were not grouped together in one place. Instead, they were spread out across different parts of the planet. Some were located near the equator, while others were positioned closer to the poles. This distribution affected the climate in different regions. Areas near the equator were generally warmer, while those closer to the poles experienced cooler conditions. The movement of continents also influenced ocean currents, which played a role in distributing heat around the planet. Among the major continental blocks present during the Cambrian were Laurentia, Baltica, Siberia, and Gondwana. Each of these landmasses had its own path of movement and its own geological history. Laurentia, which would later become part of North America, was located near the equator. Baltica, which would eventually form parts of Europe, was situated in the southern hemisphere but gradually moved northward. Siberia existed as a separate landmass and was also located in lower latitudes. Gondwana was the largest of all and included what would later become Africa, South America, Antarctica, Australia, and parts of Asia. Gondwana played a central role during the Cambrian period. It was a vast supercontinent that covered a large portion of the southern hemisphere. While other continents were smaller and more scattered, Gondwana remained relatively intact during this time. However, even Gondwana was not completely stable. It experienced internal movements and changes along its edges, which contributed to the overall reshaping of the Earth's surface. The breakup of earlier supercontinents and the formation of these new continental blocks led to an increase in the length of coastlines. As continents separated and new oceans formed, shallow seas spread over large areas of the continents. These shallow marine environments were very important for life. They provided spaces where sunlight could reach the ocean floor, allowing simple organisms to grow and thrive. The expansion of these habitats during the Cambrian period is closely linked to the rapid increase in the diversity of life at that time. The movement of tectonic plates also caused volcanic activity in many regions. When plates pulled apart, magma rose to the surface, leading to the formation of new crust and volcanic features. In other areas where plates moved toward each other, one plate could be forced beneath another in a process called subduction. This also led to volcanic activity and the formation of mountain ranges. These geological processes added to the complexity of the Earth's surface during the Cambrian period. Another important aspect of the breakup of supercontinents was the effect on the atmosphere and oceans. The formation of new ocean crust and the movement of continents influenced the chemical composition of seawater. As rocks were broken down and carried into the oceans by rivers, they added minerals and nutrients to the water. These changes supported the growth of early marine life and contributed to the development of more complex ecosystems. The climate during the Cambrian period was generally warm, and there is no strong evidence of widespread glaciation during this time. The distribution of continents played a role in maintaining these conditions. With many landmasses located near the equator, there was a greater absorption of solar energy, which helped keep global temperatures relatively high. The absence of large ice sheets allowed sea levels to remain elevated, leading to the flooding of continental areas and the creation of shallow seas. The gradual movement of continents also meant that environments were constantly changing. Regions that were once underwater could become dry land, while others that were previously exposed could be submerged beneath the sea. These changes occurred over long periods and created a variety of habitats. Organisms living during the Cambrian period had to adapt to these shifting conditions, which may have contributed to the rapid evolution of new forms of life. The breakup of ancient supercontinents did not happen in a single direction or at a single speed. Different parts of the Earth experienced different rates of movement. Some continental blocks moved quickly, while others remained relatively stable for long periods. The direction of movement was also varied, with some continents drifting towards the equator and others moving away from it. These differences added to the complexity of the global system. As the continents moved, they also rotated and changed their orientation. This meant that coastlines were constantly being reshaped. New bays and inlets formed, while others disappeared. The interaction between land and sea created diverse environments that supported a wide range of organisms. The presence of shallow seas along the edges of continents was especially important for the development of early marine ecosystems. The breakup of supercontinents also had an impact on the distribution of sediments. As continents eroded, material was carried by rivers into the oceans and deposited on the seafloor. These sediments built up over time, forming layers of rock that provide important information about the conditions during the Cambrian period. By studying these rocks, scientists can learn about the movement of continents, the climate, and the types of organisms that lived during this time. In addition to sedimentation, the movement of tectonic plates also led to the formation of rift valleys and other geological features. When a continent begins to split, the crust stretches and sinks in certain areas, creating long valleys. These rift valleys can eventually develop into new ocean basins if the separation continues. During the Cambrian period, several such features were forming as the continents continued to move apart. The oceans that formed as a result of the breakup were not all the same. Some were wide and deep, while others were narrow and shallow. The differences in depth and size affected the types of currents that developed within them. Ocean currents played an important role in distributing heat and nutrients, influencing both the climate and the distribution of life. The interaction between continents and oceans created a dynamic system that was constantly changing. The breakup of ancient supercontinents also influenced the chemistry of the atmosphere. Volcanic activity released gases, such as carbon dioxide, into the air, which contributed to the greenhouse effect and helped maintain warm temperatures. At the same time, the weathering of rocks on the continents removed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and stored it in the oceans. These processes worked together to regulate the climate over long periods. The position of continents also affected wind patterns. As air moved across the surface of the Earth, it was influenced by the arrangement of land and sea. This led to the development of different climate zones, with variations in temperature and rainfall. These conditions in turn influenced the types of environments that existed and the organisms that could live in them. During the Cambrian period, the Earth's surface was a place of ongoing change. The breakup of ancient supercontinents was not a sudden event, but a continuous process that shaped the planet over millions of years. The movement of tectonic plates, the formation of new oceans, and the shifting positions of continents all contributed to a complex and evolving world. The effects of these changes were not limited to the physical structure of the Earth. They also had a direct impact on the development of life. The expansion of shallow seas created new habitats where organisms could grow and diversify. The movement of continents brought different environments into contact with each other, allowing species to spread and adapt to new conditions. The chemical changes in the oceans provided the nutrients needed for life to flourish. As the Cambrian period continued, the arrangement of continents became more defined. The major landmasses moved into positions that would influence the development of later geological periods. The patterns of movement established during this time set the stage for future changes in the Earth's structure and environment. The study of the breakup of ancient supercontinents during the Cambrian period provides valuable insights into the history of the Earth. By examining the rocks, fossils, and other evidence from this time, scientists can reconstruct the movements of continents and understand how these changes influenced the planet as a whole. The process of continental breakup is a key part of plate tectonics, which continues to shape the Earth today. Even though the Cambrian period is known for the rapid increase in the diversity of life, the geological changes that occurred during this time were just as important. The breakup of supercontinents created the conditions that allowed life to expand and evolve. Without these changes, the development of complex ecosystems might have been very different. The interactions between the Earth's interior, surface, oceans and atmosphere during the Cambrian period were closely connected. The movement of tectonic plates influenced volcanic activity, which affected the atmosphere. The position of continents shaped ocean currents, which influenced climate and life. These connections show that the Earth operates as a system in which different parts are linked together. Over the course of the Cambrian period, the process of continental breakup continued to shape the planet. The continents drifted further apart, oceans widened, and new geological features formed. These changes occurred gradually, but their effects were significant. The Earth that existed at the end of the Cambrian period was very different from the one at its beginning. The legacy of these changes can still be seen today. The continents that exist now are the result of millions of years of movement and transformation. The oceans that cover much of the planet were formed through processes that began long ago. By studying the Cambrian period, it is possible to understand how these features developed and how the Earth has changed over time. The period known as the Cambrian is one of the most important stretches of time in the long history of life on Earth, and within it there is a phase often called the Cambrian Explosion. This phrase is used to describe a time when life changed in a very noticeable and powerful way, especially in the oceans. During this time, many new kinds of living things appeared, and they showed a wide range of forms, body structures, and ways of living. The Earth had already existed for a very long time before this, and life had already begun. But what happened during this phase marked a clear and striking change in how complex and varied life could become. Before this period began, most living things were very small and simple. Many of them were made of only one cell, and even the ones made of many cells were usually soft and did not have hard parts like shells or bones. These early organisms lived mainly in water, especially in the oceans, and they did not leave many clear remains behind. Because of this, it is harder for scientists to study them in detail. However, as the Cambrian period began, something changed in the conditions on Earth that allowed life to become more complex and more visible in the fossil record. The beginning of the Cambrian period is placed at about 541 million years ago. At this time, the continents were arranged very differently from how they are today. Large areas of shallow seas covered parts of the land, and these shallow marine environments provided a good place for life to grow and spread. The water in these areas was often warm and rich in minerals, and sunlight could reach down to the sea floor in many places, helping organisms that depended on light or on other organisms that used light. During this time, oxygen levels in the atmosphere and in the oceans were higher than they had been earlier. Oxygen is important for many forms of life because it allows cells to produce energy more efficiently. With more oxygen available, organisms could grow larger and develop more complex bodies. This change in oxygen levels is believed to have played a role in the sudden increase in the variety of life forms during the Cambrian. Another important change during this period was the development of hard body parts. Many organisms began to form shells, exoskeletons, and other structures made of minerals like calcium carbonate. These hard parts helped protect them from predators and also gave support to their bodies. Because these parts could be preserved more easily, after the organisms died, they left behind many fossils. This is one reason why the Cambrian period appears to show a sudden increase in the number of different life forms, since more of them could now be recorded in the rock layers. As life began to diversify, many different groups of animals appeared. These included early forms of arthropods, which are animals with jointed limbs and segmented bodies. Arthropods became one of the most successful groups of animals and are still very common today. During the Cambrian, early arthropods showed a wide variety of shapes and sizes, and they occupied many different roles in the marine environment. One of the most well-known creatures from this time is a group called trilobites. Trilobites had a hard outer shell divided into 3 main parts along their length, and they had many segments across their bodies. They lived on the sea floor and were very common in Cambrian seas. Their fossils are found in many parts of the world, and they help scientists understand the conditions of ancient oceans. In addition to trilobites, there were other early animals with unusual body plans. Some of these creatures do not have direct modern equivalents, meaning that their forms are not seen in living animals today. These organisms show that during the Cambrian, life was experimenting with many different ways of building bodies. Some of these body plans continued into later periods and led to modern groups, while others disappeared and did not leave descendants. Sponges were also present during the Cambrian, and they represent some of the simplest forms of multicellular life. They lived attached to the seafloor and filtered water to obtain food. Even though they are simple, they played a role in the ecosystems of the time by helping to cycle nutrients through the water. Another important group that appeared during the Cambrian includes early mollusks. These animals had soft bodies and some had shells. Mollusks would later become a very diverse group that includes animals such as snails, clams, and squids. Their early forms during the Cambrian show the beginnings of this diversity. There were also early forms of animals that had a structure called a notochord, which is a flexible rod that supports the body. These organisms are related to the ancestors of vertebrates, which are animals with backbones. The appearance of such features during the Cambrian marks an important step in the development of more complex animals, including those that would later live on land. The ecosystems of the Cambrian seas became more complex as these different organisms interacted with each other. Some animals fed on small particles in the water, others grazed on microbial mats, and some became predators that hunted other animals. The presence of predators is believed to have influenced the development of defenses, such as shells, spines, and the ability to move quickly. This interaction between predators and prey may have driven further diversification as organisms adapted to survive in changing conditions. Movement became more important during this time. Many animals developed the ability to crawl, burrow, or swim. This allowed them to explore new areas, find food, and avoid danger. Burrowing into the seafloor also changed the structure of the sediments, mixing layers and affecting the environment for other organisms. This activity is sometimes referred to as bioturbation, and it had lasting effects on marine ecosystems. Fossil sites from the Cambrian period provide valuable information about this time. Some locations have preserved not only hard parts, but also soft tissues, giving a more complete picture of ancient life. These sites show details such as limbs, eyes, and internal organs, which helps scientists understand how these organisms lived and functioned. One well-known fossil site is the Burgess Shale in what is now Canada. This site contains many well-preserved fossils of Cambrian organisms, including those with unusual and complex body structures. Another important site is Chengjiang in China, which also provides detailed fossils from the early Cambrian. These sites show that the diversity of life during this period was even greater than what is seen from fossils of hard parts alone. The rapid diversification during the Cambrian does not mean that life suddenly appeared from nothing. Instead, it reflects a period when existing life forms evolved more complex structures and diversified into many new types. The roots of this diversification can be traced back to earlier periods, where simpler organisms were already present. The Cambrian period represents a time when these earlier forms gave rise to more complex and varied descendants. Changes in the environment likely played a role in this process. The breakup of earlier landmasses, changes in sea levels, and shifts in climate may have created new habitats and opportunities for life. The availability of nutrients in the oceans also influenced the growth of organisms. In some areas, upwelling of nutrient-rich water supported large populations of plankton, which formed the base of the food chain. Genetic factors also contributed to the diversification of life. Changes in genes that control the development of body structures allowed for new forms to arise. These genetic changes made it possible for organisms to develop different shapes, sizes, and functions. Over time, natural selection acted on these variations, favoring those that were better suited to their environments. The fossil record from the Cambrian shows a pattern of increasing complexity. Early in the period, organisms were simpler and less varied. As time went on, more complex structures appeared, including specialized limbs, sensory organs, and digestive systems. These features allowed organisms to interact with their environment in new ways. Eyes are one of the notable developments during this time. Some Cambrian animals had simple, light-sensitive spots, while others developed more complex eyes capable of forming images. The ability to see would have been a major advantage for finding food and avoiding predators, and it may have contributed to the rapid diversification of life. The development of different feeding strategies also played a role. Some animals filtered small particles from the water, others scraped surfaces, and some actively hunted. This variety of feeding methods allowed many species to coexist by using different resources. As a result, ecosystems became more structured and diverse. The Cambrian seas were filled with life at many levels. Small organisms formed the base of the food web, while larger animals occupied higher levels. The interactions between these levels created a dynamic system where changes in one part could affect others. This complexity is a key feature of modern ecosystems, and its early development can be traced back to this period. The spread of life during the Cambrian was not limited to one region. Fossils from this time are found on many continents, showing that these changes were global. Even though the continents were arranged differently, the oceans connected them, allowing organisms to spread and evolve in different areas. As the Cambrian period continued, some groups became more dominant, while others declined or disappeared. This process of change is a normal part of evolution, where some forms are more successful than others under certain conditions. The diversity seen during the Cambrian laid the foundation for future developments in the history of life. The term explosion can give the impression of a sudden and brief event, but in reality, the diversification of life during the Cambrian took place over millions of years. It was a period of steady and significant change rather than an instant transformation. The use of the term reflects the noticeable increase in diversity seen in the fossil record. The study of this period continues to provide new insights. Advances in technology allow scientists to analyze fossils in greater detail and to study the chemical composition of rocks from this time. These studies help to reconstruct the environments of the past and to understand the conditions that supported the growth of life. The Cambrian period represents a key chapter in the history of life on Earth. It shows how life can respond to changes in the environment and how new forms can arise through the process of evolution. The organisms that appeared during this time include the early ancestors of many modern groups, and their development set the stage for later changes. Life during this period remained mostly in the oceans, as land was still largely barren. The colonization of land by plants and animals would occur later, in subsequent periods. However, the developments during the Cambrian were important steps towards that future expansion. The fossil record from the Cambrian provides a detailed view of this time, but it is still incomplete. Not all organisms were preserved, and some environments did not leave behind clear evidence. Even so, the available fossils show a rich and varied picture of life during this period. The diversification of life during the Cambrian is one of the most studied topics in paleontology. It raises questions about the causes of such rapid change and about the factors that influence the evolution of life. By studying this period, scientists aim to understand not only the past, but also the general principles that govern the development of life on Earth. As research continues, new discoveries may change our understanding of the Cambrian period. Fossils from previously unexplored areas, along with new methods of analysis, can provide additional information. Each discovery adds to the overall picture and helps to fill gaps in our knowledge. The Cambrian explosion remains a central concept in the study of early life. It represents a time when the diversity of life increased in a significant way, leading to the appearance of many forms that would shape the future of the biosphere. The processes that occurred during this time continue to be a subject of interest and investigation. The events of the Cambrian period show that life is capable of great change and adaptation. Under the right conditions, new forms can develop and existing ones can diversify into many different types. This ability to change is a fundamental aspect of life and is seen throughout its history. The Cambrian seas, filled with a wide range of organisms, represent an important stage in the development of complex ecosystems. The interactions between these organisms along with the environmental conditions of the time, created a setting where life could expand and diversify in new ways. The climate patterns and temperature conditions of the Cambrian Earth were shaped by a wide range of physical processes that were active across the planet during that time. The Cambrian Period began around 541 million years ago and lasted until about 485 million years ago. During this long span of time, the Earth experienced conditions that were generally warm, with no large and persistent ice sheets covering the continents. The arrangement of land and sea, the movement of continents, the composition of the atmosphere and the activity within the oceans all played important roles in shaping how temperature and climate behaved across the planet. At the beginning of the Cambrian, most of the Earth's landmasses were grouped into large continental blocks that were located mainly in the southern part of the planet. One of the largest of these landmasses was Gondwana, which covered a vast area near the southern polar region. Despite its position near the pole, evidence suggests that large-scale glaciation was not present during most of the Cambrian. This indicates that global temperatures were relatively high, allowing even polar regions to remain free of long-lasting ice sheets. The absence of widespread ice helped maintain higher sea levels, as less water was locked away in frozen form. The oceans during the Cambrian covered a greater portion of the Earth's surface than they do today. Much of the land was submerged under shallow seas, especially along continental margins. These shallow marine environments played a key role in regulating temperature because water absorbs and stores heat more effectively than land. As sunlight reached the surface of these seas, heat was distributed across wide areas, helping to reduce extreme differences between day and night temperatures. This also contributed to relatively stable climate conditions in many parts of the world. The atmosphere of the Cambrian contained different levels of gases. Compared to modern times, carbon dioxide levels were significantly higher than they are today. This gas is known to trap heat in the atmosphere, and its abundance would have contributed to the generally warm conditions observed during the Cambrian. Oxygen levels were lower than modern levels but were gradually increasing during this period due to biological activity in the oceans. The balance between carbon dioxide and oxygen influenced not only the temperature but also the chemistry of the oceans and the development of early life. Volcanic activity was another important factor influencing climate patterns during the Cambrian. The movement of tectonic plates caused frequent volcanic eruptions, especially along mid-ocean ridges and continental margins. These eruptions released large amounts of gases, including carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere. Over long periods, this contributed to warming by enhancing the greenhouse effect. At the same time, volcanic ash and particles could temporarily block sunlight, leading to short-term cooling in certain regions. These effects created variations in climate that could last for years or longer. The circulation of ocean currents during the Cambrian played a crucial role in distributing heat around the planet. Warm water from equatorial regions moved toward higher latitudes, while cooler water flowed back toward the equator. This movement helped regulate temperatures and prevented extreme differences between different parts of the world. The configuration of continents influenced how these currents moved. Since many landmasses were located in the southern hemisphere, ocean currents were shaped in ways that supported the transfer of heat across large distances. Seasonal changes during the Cambrian were present, but likely less extreme than in many parts of the modern world. The tilt of the Earth's axis was similar to what it is today, which means that different regions still experience variations in sunlight throughout the year. However, the overall warm climate and the large extent of shallow seas helped reduce sharp seasonal contrasts. Regions closer to the equator would have experienced relatively stable temperatures throughout the year, while areas farther from the equator would have seen more variation, but still within a generally warm range. Evidence from sedimentary rocks provides important clues about Cambrian climate conditions. Certain types of rocks, such as limestone, form in warm, shallow marine environments. The widespread presence of these rocks from the Cambrian suggests that such conditions were common across large areas of the Earth. In addition, the absence of glacial deposits in most Cambrian rock layers supports the idea that the planet did not experience major ice ages during this period. The chemical composition of seawater during the Cambrian also reflects the influence of climate and temperature. Warmer temperatures can increase the rate at which minerals dissolve and interact within the oceans. This affects the availability of elements needed for biological processes. The Cambrian is known for a rapid increase in the diversity of life, often referred to as the Cambrian Explosion. While biological evolution is not the focus here, it is important to note that stable and warm climate conditions provided an environment where life could expand and diversify. Rainfall patterns during the Cambrian would have been influenced by the distribution of land and sea. With large areas covered by shallow oceans, evaporation rates were high, leading to the formation of clouds and precipitation. Coastal regions likely experienced regular rainfall, while interior areas of large landmasses may have been drier. However, since much of the land was located near the equator or in regions influenced by ocean currents, extreme dryness was less common than in some modern desert regions. Wind patterns also played a role in shaping the climate of the Cambrian. The rotation of the Earth and the distribution of heat between the equator and the poles created global wind systems. These winds helped move air masses and influenced weather patterns. In regions where warm air rose and cooler air sank, circulation systems developed that contributed to the movement of moisture and heat. These processes were similar in principle to modern atmospheric circulation, although the specific patterns were shaped by the different arrangement of continents and oceans. The lack of large land-based vegetation during the Cambrian had a noticeable impact on climate. At this time, plants had not yet spread widely across land surfaces. Without extensive vegetation, there was less absorption of carbon dioxide through photosynthesis on land. This allowed higher levels of carbon dioxide to remain in the atmosphere, contributing to warmer conditions. In addition, the absence of plant roots meant that soil formation was limited, which influenced how water moved across land surfaces and affected local climate conditions. The interaction between the atmosphere and the oceans was an ongoing process that influenced temperature conditions throughout the Cambrian. Heat from the sun was absorbed by the ocean surface and then distributed through currents and mixing. This helped maintain relatively uniform temperatures in many regions. The exchange of gases between the ocean and the atmosphere also played a role in regulating carbon dioxide levels. As carbon dioxide dissolved in seawater, it could be used in chemical reactions that removed it from the atmosphere over long periods. There were also periods within the Cambrian when climate conditions changed more noticeably. These changes were often linked to shifts in tectonic activity, variations in atmospheric composition, or changes in sea level. For example, an increase in volcanic activity could raise carbon dioxide levels and lead to warming, while a decrease could allow temperatures to stabilize or cool slightly. Similarly, changes in ocean circulation could alter how heat was distributed, leading to regional differences in temperature. Sea level changes were closely connected to climate conditions during the Cambrian. High global temperatures meant that there was little ice to store water, resulting in higher sea levels. This created extensive shallow seas that covered large portions of the continents. When sea levels rose, more areas were submerged, which could influence local climates by increasing humidity and moderating temperatures. When sea levels fell, more land was exposed, which could lead to greater temperature variation in those regions. The polar regions during the Cambrian were not covered by thick ice sheets as they are today. Instead, they experienced conditions that were cool compared to equatorial regions, but still relatively mild. Evidence suggests that temperatures in these areas were above freezing for much of the time, allowing liquid water to exist and supporting marine life. This indicates that the global climate system was effective in distributing heat from warmer regions to cooler ones. Storm activity during the Cambrian likely included strong winds and waves, especially in shallow seas. The movement of air and water could generate storms that influenced local weather conditions. These storms would have played a role in mixing ocean waters, distributing nutrients, and shaping coastal environments. While the exact frequency and intensity of these storms are not fully known, their presence would have been an important part of the climate system. The long-term stability of Cambrian climate conditions was influenced by feedback processes within the Earth system. For example, higher temperatures could increase the rate of weathering of rocks on land. This process removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and stores it in sediments. Over time, this could help reduce atmospheric carbon dioxide levels and moderate temperatures. At the same time, volcanic activity could add carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, creating a balance that maintained relatively stable conditions over long periods. The distribution of temperature across the planet during the Cambrian was influenced by latitude, ocean currents, and atmospheric circulation. Equatorial regions were the warmest, receiving the most direct sunlight throughout the year. Temperatures gradually decreased toward the poles, but the difference was smaller than in many later periods. This more uniform distribution of temperature contributed to the widespread presence of similar marine environments across different regions. Changes in solar radiation over time may also have played a role in shaping Cambrian climate conditions. While the Sun was slightly less luminous than it is today, higher levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere compensated for this difference. This allowed the Earth to maintain warm temperatures despite receiving slightly less energy from the Sun. The balance between incoming solar radiation and the greenhouse effect was a key factor in determining overall climate conditions. The interaction between living organisms and the environment began to have a more noticeable impact during the Cambrian. As marine life became more abundant and diverse, biological processes started to influence the chemistry of the oceans and atmosphere. For example, the production of oxygen through photosynthesis by certain microorganisms contributed to gradual changes in atmospheric composition. These changes, in turn, could affect climate by altering the balance of gases that trap heat. Sediments deposited during the Cambrian provide valuable records of past climate conditions. Layers of rock formed in different environments, such as shallow seas, deeper ocean settings, and coastal areas, each contain information about temperature, water chemistry, and biological activity. By studying these rocks, scientists can reconstruct patterns of climate and temperature across different regions and times within the Cambrian. The overall picture that emerges from these lines of evidence is one of a warm and relatively stable climate, with variations occurring over time due to natural processes. The absence of large ice sheets, the presence of widespread shallow seas, and the higher levels of greenhouse gases all contributed to maintaining these conditions. At the same time, the dynamic nature of the Earth's systems ensured that climate was not completely uniform, with regional differences and periodic changes adding complexity to the overall pattern. As the Cambrian progressed, gradual changes in tectonic activity, atmospheric composition, and ocean circulation continued to shape climate conditions. These changes set the stage for further developments in the periods that followed, influencing the direction of both environmental conditions and the evolution of life on Earth. The evolution of early arthropods in Cambrian seas refers to a long and detailed process in which many groups of small and large marine animals developed new body forms, new ways of moving, new feeding methods, and new structures that allowed them to live in different parts of the oceans during the Cambrian Period. The Cambrian Period took place hundreds of millions of years ago, beginning about 540 million years ago, and lasting for many tens of millions of years. During this time, the seas covered large areas of the planet, and these seas became the main place where many living organisms developed and changed in form. Early arthropods were among the most important animal groups in these seas, and they played a major role in shaping marine life. Arthropods are animals with segmented bodies, hard outer coverings made of a material called chitin, and jointed limbs. In the Cambrian seas, the earliest arthropods appeared as part of a wide expansion of marine life forms that developed new body structures. These early arthropods did not appear suddenly in a single form, but developed through many small stages of change over time. Their bodies showed segmentation, meaning their bodies were divided into repeated sections. Each section could carry appendages or parts that helped in movement or feeding. The hard outer covering provided protection and support for muscles inside the body. This structure allowed movement in water while also giving the body a stable shape. In the early Cambrian seas, simple marine organisms already existed, including soft-bodied animals and early forms of animals with basic skeletal support. Over time, some of these organisms developed harder body coverings and jointed structures. This change was important for arthropod evolution because it allowed more control of movement and better protection from environmental conditions in the ocean. The development of jointed limbs meant that early arthropods could move their body parts in different directions, which helped them interact with the seafloor and water environment in new ways. One of the most significant groups of early arthropods in Cambrian seas was the trilobites. Trilobites appeared early in the Cambrian and became widely distributed in marine environments. Their bodies were divided into three main longitudinal sections running from head to tail. These sections included a central part and two side parts, which gave the body a structured form. The body was also divided from front to back into segments, each with a specific arrangement of appendages. The head region contained sensory structures and feeding structures that helped the organism detect food and environmental signals in the water. Trilobites developed compound eyes in many forms. These eyes were made of many small visual units that detected light and movement in the water. The development of eyes in early arthropods marked an important step in sensory evolution. It allowed organisms to respond more effectively to changes in light conditions and movement in their surroundings. Some trilobites lived on the sea floor, moving across sediment surfaces and interacting with particles of organic material. Others moved within the water column, depending on their feeding habits and body structures. The exoskeleton of trilobites was divided into sections that could be shed and replaced during growth. This process, known as molting, allowed the organism to increase in size over time. During molting, the outer covering was separated and replaced with a new one that allowed further growth. This process required energy and time, and it occurred repeatedly during the life of the organism. The presence of molting in early arthropods shows that growth involved periodic shedding of external structures rather than continuous expansion. Another important group of Cambrian arthropods included radiodonts, which were early marine predators with specialized feeding structures. These organisms had elongated bodies and frontal appendages that were used for capturing food. The frontal appendages were jointed and could move in different directions to grasp or manipulate food particles. The mouth region contained circular structures that processed food before it entered the digestive system. Radiodonts lived in marine environments where they interacted with other organisms by feeding on soft-bodied animals and smaller marine creatures. The body structure of radiodonts included a segmented trunk with lateral flaps that assisted in movement through water. These flaps moved in a coordinated manner, allowing the organism to generate motion in marine currents. The internal structures supported feeding, movement, and sensory perception. Some radiodonts had large body sizes relative to many other Cambrian arthropods, while others remained smaller. Their diversity shows that early arthropods occupied multiple ecological roles in Cambrian seas. Early arthropods also included forms that lived in association with the sea floor. These benthic arthropods interacted with sediments, organic particles, and microbial layers on the ocean floor. Their limbs were adapted for walking, digging, or gathering food from surfaces. The segmentation of their bodies allowed flexibility in movement, while the exoskeleton provided protection from physical conditions in the marine environment. Some of these arthropods had appendages specialized for feeding on detritus, which is organic material that settles on the seafloor. The development of sensory structures in early arthropods played an important role in their evolution. Sensory organs included simple, light-detecting cells, chemical sensing structures, and in some cases more complex visual systems. These structures allowed organisms to detect food sources, predators, and environmental changes. The ability to sense chemical signals in water helped arthropods locate food particles and respond to nearby organisms. Light detection supported orientation in the water column and on the seafloor. The nervous system of early arthropods developed as a series of connected nerve centers running along the body. Each segment of the body often contained nerve clusters that controlled movement and sensory input in that region. This distributed nervous system allowed coordination of limb movement and body control. Signals were transmitted through nerve connections, allowing different parts of the body to respond to environmental input. This organization supported coordinated movement of multiple appendages during feeding and locomotion. Reproduction in early arthropods likely involved the release of eggs into marine environments. These eggs developed in water and passed through early developmental stages before reaching mature forms. Larval stages often differed in structure from adult forms, with changes occurring as development progressed. These developmental stages allowed dispersal in marine environments, as young organisms could be carried by currents to different regions of the ocean. During the Cambrian period, marine environments included shallow seas, deeper ocean regions, and areas close to ancient continental margins. Early arthropods occupied many of these environments. Some remained close to sediment surfaces, while others lived in open water. Environmental conditions influenced body structure, feeding behavior, and movement patterns. Oxygen levels in seawater supported the metabolic needs of growing arthropod populations, and nutrient availability supported the expansion of marine ecosystems. The development of exoskeletons in arthropods had a strong influence on fossil preservation. Hard outer coverings were more likely to be preserved in sediment compared to soft tissues. As a result, many Cambrian arthropod fossils show clear impressions of segmented bodies and appendages. Fossil evidence from Cambrian sediment layers provides detailed information about body structure, limb arrangement, and external features of these organisms. These fossils are found in various regions of the world where ancient seas once existed. Early arthropods also showed variation in body segmentation patterns. Some had many body segments, while others had fewer segments arranged in distinct regions. The arrangement of segments influenced movement and feeding behavior. Segments near the head region were often associated with sensory and feeding structures, while segments toward the rear supported movement and stability. This organization allowed functional specialization of body regions. The evolution of jointed appendages in arthropods involved gradual changes in limb structure. Early limb forms may have been simple extensions of the body wall, but over time they developed joints that allowed bending and rotation. These joints improved movement control in water and on sediment surfaces. Appendages could be used for walking, swimming, feeding, and interaction with environmental materials. The development of multiple limb types within the same organism supported different functions across body regions. Some early arthropods developed protective spines and extensions on their exoskeletons. These structures may have provided protection and may have influenced movement through water and sediment. Spines appeared on various parts of the body, including the head region, trunk segments, and tail region. These features added structural complexity to the body and contributed to diversity among arthropod forms. Feeding strategies in early arthropods varied widely. Some organisms fed on small particles suspended in water, while others consumed organic material from the seafloor. Some early arthropods captured small prey using specialized appendages. Feeding structures included mouthparts, filtering limbs, and grasping appendages. The development of these feeding systems allowed early arthropods to use different food sources available in Cambrian seas. The Cambrian seas contained a wide range of ecological interactions involving early arthropods. Some arthropods moved across surfaces covered with microbial layers, feeding on organic material. Others interacted with sediment particles and small marine organisms. Movement patterns included crawling, swimming, and drifting with currents. The structure of limbs and body segments influenced how each organism interacted with its environment. The internal anatomy of early arthropods included digestive systems that processed ingested material, circulatory systems that transported nutrients, and muscle systems that controlled movement. Muscles were attached to the inner surface of the exoskeleton, allowing limb movement when muscles contracted. The arrangement of muscles in segmented bodies allowed coordinated motion across multiple limbs and body sections. Some arthropods developed specialized respiratory structures that allowed gas exchange in marine environments. These structures were often associated with appendages or body surfaces. Oxygen from seawater diffused into the body through thin membranes, supporting metabolic activity. The efficiency of gas exchange influenced activity levels and movement patterns in different environments. The diversification of early arthropods in Cambrian seas involved the development of many body plans. These body plans included variations in segmentation, limb structure, sensory organs, and feeding systems. Each form occupied a specific role in marine ecosystems. Over time, the number of arthropod types increased as new adaptations appeared and existing structures were modified. Fossil deposits from Cambrian marine environments show a wide range of arthropod forms preserved in fine detail. These fossils include impressions of limbs, body segments, and external coverings. Some fossils preserve entire body structures, while others show partial remains. The distribution of fossils across different regions indicates that early arthropods were widespread in marine environments. The development of early arthropods also involved genetic changes that controlled body segmentation, limb formation, and exoskeleton development. These genetic mechanisms influenced how body parts were arranged during development. Small changes in genetic regulation produced variations in body structure, leading to the emergence of new forms over time. The Cambrian seas supported continuous interaction between environmental conditions and biological development. Sediment composition, water movement, and nutrient availability influenced arthropod life cycles. Seasonal changes in marine conditions may have affected reproduction and growth patterns. Over long periods, these factors contributed to the diversification of arthropod populations across different marine habitats. Early arthropods continued to develop new structural features as Cambrian marine ecosystems expanded. Appendages became more specialized for different functions, including feeding, movement, and environmental interaction. Body segmentation patterns became more varied, and sensory systems became more developed in many lineages. These changes occurred across many generations of organisms in Cambrian seas. The presence of early arthropods in marine ecosystems influenced the structure of biological communities. Their movement across sediment surfaces affected distribution of organic material. Their feeding activity influenced availability of nutrients in local environments. Their interactions with other organisms contributed to the overall structure of marine life during the Cambrian period. The study of early arthropod evolution in Cambrian seas continues through analysis of fossil evidence, sediment layers, and preserved anatomical structures. Each fossil discovery adds information about body form, movement patterns, and ecological roles of these organisms. The Cambrian seas contained a wide range of arthropod diversity that developed through gradual changes in structure, function, and environmental interaction, and these patterns remain visible in the preserved remains found in ancient rock formations. The first appearance of major animal groups known as phyla marks a very important stage in the history of life on Earth. This stage is especially associated with a long span of time that began more than 540 million years ago, when the oceans of Earth contained many forms of simple and early animals that were beginning to show a wide range of body structures. Before this time, life on Earth had already existed for a very long period, mainly in the form of single-celled organisms and simple multicellular organisms that lived in marine environments. These earlier forms of life slowly changed over long periods, and by the time of the early part of this major diversification of animals, the conditions in the oceans allowed many different body structures to appear and persist. During this time, the oceans were filled with increasing biological activity. Many animals developed hard parts such as shells, outer coverings, and internal support structures. These features helped preserve their remains in sediments, allowing modern scientists to study them through fossils. The fossil record from this period shows that many major groups of animals appeared within a relatively broad span of geological time, and these groups include arthropods, mollusks, echinoderms, annelids, brachiopods, quinidarians, sponges, and early chordates. Each of these groups represents a different body organization and a different way of living in marine environments. Sponges represent one of the earliest groups to show clear evidence in the fossil record. These animals had simple body structures without true tissues and organs. Their bodies were made of cells arranged in a way that allowed water to pass through, bringing food particles for feeding. Fossil evidence of sponge-like organisms appears in sediments that date back to more than 540 million years ago. These early sponges lived attached to the seafloor and played a role in filtering water. Their presence shows that multicellular life had already developed systems for feeding and survival in marine settings. Cnidarians also appear in early fossil records from this period. This group includes organisms with radial body organization and specialized cells used for capturing food. Early Cnidarian forms show evidence of soft-bodied marine organisms that lived in shallow seas. Their body structures allowed them to interact with floating and swimming organisms in the water. Fossils and impressions of these animals show that they were part of early marine ecosystems, where different forms of life were beginning to interact in more complex ways. Annelids, which are segmented worms, also appear in this early period of animal history. Evidence of these organisms is found mainly through trace fossils, which are marks left in sediment by movement or feeding activity. These traces include burrows and tracks that show how these animals moved through soft ocean floor sediments. The body organization of annelids includes repeated segments along the length of the body, and this structure allowed flexible movement and interaction with sediment environments. Their appearance shows that animals had already developed movement patterns that involved digging, crawling, and interacting directly with the seafloor. Brachiopods are another group that appears during this time. These animals had two shells that covered their bodies and were attached to the seafloor in most cases. Fossil evidence of brachiopods is abundant in early marine sediments. Their shells were made of minerals that allowed them to be preserved easily in rock layers. These animals filtered food particles from water, and their presence in fossil records shows that filter feeding was already an established method of survival in marine ecosystems. The diversity of early brachiopods indicates that different forms of shell structure and feeding strategies were already present. Mollusks also first appear in the fossil record during this period. Early mollusks included simple forms that later gave rise to groups such as snails, clams, and cephalopods. Fossils from early marine sediments show shell structures that were often small and simple in form. These shells provided protection and structural support. Mollusks had soft bodies, and their early development included the formation of a muscular foot used for movement or attachment. The appearance of mollusks shows that body systems supporting movement and protection had developed in multiple independent ways. Arthropods represent one of the most diverse and abundant groups that first appear during this time. This group includes organisms with segmented bodies, jointed limbs, and outer skeletons made of hardened material. Early arthropods show a wide range of body designs, including forms adapted for crawling, swimming, and burrowing. Fossils and trace fossils indicate that arthropods were active in marine environments and played important roles in the movement of sediments and interaction with other organisms. Their outer skeletons allowed better preservation in fossil records, giving detailed information about their structure and development. Echinoderms also appeared during this period. This group includes organisms such as early relatives of star-shaped marine animals and sea urchins. Early echinoderms showed body structures arranged around a central point. Fossils indicate that these animals lived on the seafloor and interacted with sediment and water currents. Their body organization included internal support structures made of mineralized material. The early appearance of echinoderms shows that radial body organization developed in multiple forms of marine life. Chordates appear during this time in very early forms. These organisms are part of the group that later includes vertebrates. Early chordates were small and had simple body structures that included a flexible support rod along the body. Fossils of early chordate-like organisms show features such as segmented muscle structures and basic forms of a nervous system. These organisms lived in marine environments and were part of early food chains. Their appearance marks an important stage in the development of animals with internal support systems. During this same period, many small-shelled organisms appear in fossil records. These organisms are often found in clusters of tiny, mineralized structures that show a wide variety of shapes. Some of these structures are parts of early mollusks, brachiopods, and other groups that had begun to develop hard body parts. These small skeletal elements show that mineralization of body parts had become a widespread feature among different animal groups. The presence of these remains in many geological locations indicates that marine environments supported a wide range of early animal life. The development of these major animal groups is linked with changes in genetic systems that control body formation. Genetic structures that regulate body patterns allowed organisms to develop different segments, limbs, and body regions. These genetic systems made it possible for animals to develop a wide variety of body plans within relatively short geological intervals. The appearance of different phyla in fossil records reflects the activity of these genetic systems in shaping animal bodies in different ways. Marine environments during this period included shallow seas that covered large areas of continental surfaces. These environments contained sediments, mineral particles, and nutrients that supported the growth and survival of early animals. Oxygen levels in ocean waters allowed more active movement and feeding behavior. These conditions supported the development of animals with higher energy requirements, which led to the appearance of more active forms of life in the fossil record. The fossil record of this period includes sites where soft-bodied organisms are preserved in fine detail. These preservation sites show early animals with soft tissues, including internal structures that are rarely preserved in other conditions. These fossils provide detailed information about body structures, feeding systems, and movement patterns. The presence of both hard and soft-bodied organisms in fossil deposits shows that early animal life included a wide range of body compositions. Trace fossils are also important evidence of early animal activity. These include burrows, feeding marks, and movement trails preserved in sediment layers. Trace fossils show that animals interacted with the environment in many ways, including digging into sediments, moving across surfaces, and feeding on organic material. These traces appear before or alongside body fossils of many major animal groups, showing that animal activity was widespread in marine environments. The appearance of major animal groups during this time reflects long processes of biological development that occurred over hundreds of millions of years before the fossil record shows clear evidence of diverse animals. Earlier life forms included simple, multicellular organisms that gradually developed more organized body structures. Over time, these organisms developed specialized cells, tissues, and body systems that allowed more complex interactions with the environment. Sponges maintained simple structures, while other groups developed more complex systems for movement and feeding. Cnidarians developed systems for capturing food using specialized cells. Annelids developed segmented bodies that allowed flexible movement. Mollusks developed protective shells and muscular structures. Arthropods developed jointed limbs and outer skeletons. Echinoderms developed radial body patterns and internal support systems. Chordates developed early internal support rods that later evolved into more complex skeletal structures in later forms. The fossil evidence from this time shows that these groups did not all appear at a single moment, but rather within a broad interval of geological time. Sediment layers from different regions show variations in the timing of first appearances of these groups. Some regions preserve earlier forms, while others show later stages of development. This variation indicates that marine environments across the planet supported gradual and widespread development of animal life. Early marine ecosystems included interactions between different groups of organisms. Filter feeders obtained nutrients from water, while mobile organisms moved across the seafloor, searching for food. Some organisms lived attached to surfaces, while others moved freely in water. These interactions created networks of feeding and movement that shaped the distribution of early animal life in marine environments. The development of hard parts in many animal groups played an important role in fossil preservation. Mineralized shells, outer coverings, and skeletal elements allowed remains to survive in sediment layers over long periods of time. These preserved remains provide detailed information about body structures and evolutionary development. Soft-bodied organisms are less commonly preserved, but when they are found, they provide important information about early body plans and anatomical features. The early appearance of major animal groups shows that body organization in animals reached a wide range of forms during this period. These forms include radial organization, bilateral symmetry, segmented bodies, and specialized internal structures. Each form represents a different way of organizing cells and tissues to support survival in marine environments. The genetic systems responsible for body development played a central role in shaping these forms. These systems controlled the placement of body parts, the formation of segments, and the development of limbs and shells. Changes in these genetic systems allowed different animal groups to develop distinct body structures, while sharing basic biological processes. Marine sediments from this period show layers filled with fossil remains of early animals. These layers provide records of biological activity over time, including changes in species presence and distribution. Fossil assemblages show combinations of different groups living together in marine environments, indicating that ecological relationships were already established among early animals. The presence of early animal groups in different parts of the world shows that these organisms were widely distributed in marine environments. Fossils from various continents show similar groups of organisms, indicating that marine life was not restricted to a single region. Ocean currents and marine connectivity allowed the spread of organisms across large distances. Early chordates provide important evidence of the origins of animals with internal skeletal systems. These organisms show early development of structures that later became more complex in vertebrates. Fossils of these organisms show segmented muscle patterns and basic support structures that allowed movement in water. Their appearance in fossil records provides important information about early stages of vertebrate development. Echinoderms show early development of calcified internal structures. These structures provided support and allowed interaction with the seafloor environment. Fossils of early echinoderms show variations in body shapes and feeding structures, indicating that this group had already developed diversity in form and function. Arthropods show early development of jointed limbs and segmented exoskeletons. Fossil evidence includes impressions of limbs and body segments preserved in sediment layers. These features allowed movement across different surfaces and interaction with various environments. Early arthropods also show evidence of molting, which allowed growth and changes in body size. Mollusks show early development of shells and muscular systems. Fossil shells show variation in shape and structure, indicating different modes of life. Some early mollusks attached to surfaces, while others moved across the seafloor. The development of shells provided protection and structural support. Brachiopods show early development of two-part shells that enclosed soft bodies. Fossil records show their abundance in marine sediments. These organisms remained attached to the seafloor and filtered food from water currents. Their shells are often well preserved, providing detailed information about their structure. Cnidarians show early development of radial body organization and specialized feeding cells. Fossils and impressions show simple body forms adapted to marine environments. These organisms played roles in early marine ecosystems through feeding interactions and spatial distribution. Sponges show early multicellular organization without complex tissues. Fossils of sponge-like structures show porous bodies that allow water flow. These organisms were among the earliest filter feeders in marine environments and contributed to nutrient cycling in oceans. Early mollusks appeared in marine environments during a time when ocean life was undergoing major biological development and increasing structural complexity. These organisms belong to a broad animal group known for soft bodies, a muscular foot, and in many cases a protective external shell. Their earliest forms developed in seas that covered large regions of the planet, where mineral content in water supported the formation of hard body coverings. The presence of early mollusks in these environments marked a significant stage in the expansion of animal life forms that used new biological strategies for movement, feeding, and protection. The earliest mollusk forms are understood from fossil remains preserved in marine sedimentary rocks. These fossils include small shell structures, imprints of soft body parts, and traces of movement on ancient sea floors. The shells of early mollusks often show simple shapes, including cap-like structures and curved tubular forms. These structures indicate that early mollusks already had biological systems capable of producing mineralized external coverings. The development of such coverings required biological control over mineral deposition processes within their bodies, involving the extraction of dissolved minerals from seawater and their arrangement into organized, solid structures. Early mollusks lived in shallow marine environments where sunlight reached the sea floor. These regions supported microbial mats, small algae, and other simple organisms that formed the base of marine food availability. Mollusks use different feeding strategies to obtain nutrients from these environments. Some early forms likely scraped organic material from surfaces using specialized feeding structures. Others may have filtered small particles suspended in water. The presence of varied feeding strategies contributed to the early development of ecological diversity within mollusk groups. The body structure of early mollusks was generally soft and flexible, allowing movement across sediment surfaces and interaction with surrounding marine substrates. The muscular foot, a key feature of mollusks, enabled crawling motion along the seafloor. This movement allowed early mollusks to access different feeding areas and avoid unfavorable environmental conditions. The development of this structure represented an important adaptation for survival in dynamic marine environments where sediment conditions and water flow could change frequently. Shell formation in early mollusks involved the secretion of calcium-based materials by specialized tissues. These tissues gradually deposited layers of mineral material, forming protective coverings over the soft body. Shell shapes varied among early mollusks, including simple cap-like forms, spiral structures, and elongated tubes. These variations reflect differences in biological development pathways and environmental adaptation processes. Shell growth occurred throughout the life of the organism, with new material added to existing structures as the organism increased in size. The marine environments in which early mollusks lived contained a variety of chemical conditions. Calcium and carbonate ions, present in seawater, supported biomineralization processes. The availability of these ions influenced the development of shell structures and the distribution of mollusk populations. Areas with higher mineral concentration supported greater numbers of shell-forming organisms. Sediment composition also played a role in shaping mollusk habitats, as different sediment types affected movement and feeding efficiency. Early mollusks were part of a broader expansion of marine animal life that included many newly appearing groups. These organisms interacted with other early animals through feeding relationships and shared habitats. Some mollusks occupied surfaces covered with microbial growth, while others lived partially buried in sediment layers. Their presence contributed to changes in seafloor conditions through movement and feeding activity, which influenced sediment structure and organic material distribution. The internal biology of early mollusks included organ systems responsible for digestion, movement, and sensory perception. Digestive systems processed organic material obtained from marine environments. Sensory structures allowed detection of chemical and physical changes in surrounding water. These systems were relatively simple in early forms, but supported effective survival in diverse marine settings. Nervous systems coordinated movement and feeding responses, allowing mollusks to interact with environmental stimuli. Larval development played an important role in the distribution of early mollusks across marine environments. Many mollusks produced free-swimming larval stages that drifted in ocean currents before settling onto the sea floor. This dispersal mechanism allowed mollusks to colonize new habitats over time. During larval stages, organisms underwent significant biological changes as they developed adult body structures. The transition from larval to adult forms involved the formation of the muscular foot, shell structures, and internal organs. The fossil record of early mollusks includes groups with simple shell arrangements and limited internal complexity. These early groups provide evidence of initial stages in mollusk diversification. Some forms show characteristics that relate to later major mollusk groups, including gastropods, bivalves, and cephalopods. The development of these groups occurred through gradual changes in body structure, feeding mechanisms, and shell formation patterns over extended geological periods. Gastropod-related early mollusks developed coiled shell structures in some lineages. These shells provided space for internal organs and protection from environmental conditions. Movement in these organisms involved the use of a muscular foot that allowed slow gliding across surfaces. Feeding structures in gastropod-related forms adapted to scraping and grazing on available organic material. The coiled shell structure also influenced internal body organization, requiring rotation and repositioning of organs during growth. Bivalve-related early mollusks developed paired shell structures that enclosed the body. These shells were connected by flexible hinges that allowed opening and closing movements. The internal body of these organisms was adapted for filter feeding, where water was drawn into the shell and processed to extract food particles. The development of filter feeding allowed bivalve-related mollusks to utilize suspended organic material in marine environments. Sedentary lifestyles became common in these organisms, with many attaching to or resting on seafloor surfaces. Cephalopod-related early mollusks showed development of more complex body organization, including elongated bodies and specialized feeding structures. Some early forms developed internal or partially internal shell structures. These adaptations allowed increased mobility within marine environments. The development of tentacle-like appendages in later cephalopod forms supported active predation strategies. Early cephalopod ancestors contributed to diversification of mollusk body plans and ecological roles within marine systems. Scaphopod-related mollusks developed tubular shell structures that opened at both ends. These organisms lived partially buried in sediment and used specialized feeding structures to capture small food particles. Their body organization supported a lifestyle focused on interaction with sediment layers. The development of tubular shells provided stability within soft marine substrates. The diversification of early mollusks involved genetic and developmental changes that influenced body structure formation. Gene regulation processes controlled shell shape, muscle development, and organ organization. Small changes in developmental pathways produced variation in adult forms, contributing to the emergence of new morphological types. These changes accumulated over time, leading to the establishment of distinct mollusk lineages. Marine ecosystems during the early expansion of mollusks included microbial communities, simple algae, and other invertebrate organisms. Mollusks interacted with these communities through feeding and habitat occupation. Surface grazing activities affected microbial layer distribution. Sediment movement caused by mollusk activity influenced nutrient cycling within seafloor environments. These interactions contributed to the development of structured ecological systems within marine habitats. The distribution of early mollusks across marine environments depended on water depth, sediment type, and chemical composition of seawater. Shallow regions supported high biological activity due to nutrient availability and sunlight exposure. Deeper regions contained fewer organisms, but still supported specialized mollusk forms adapted to low light and reduced food availability. The ability of mollusks to occupy different environmental zones contributed to their widespread presence in ancient seas. Shell microstructure in early mollusks shows layered arrangements of calcium carbonate crystals. These layers formed through repeated biological deposition processes. The arrangement of crystals provided structural strength and resistance to environmental stress. Variations in microstructure reflect differences in biological control mechanisms among early mollusk groups. Growth patterns within shells record information about environmental conditions experienced during development. Early mollusks also developed sensory and behavioral responses to environmental changes. Chemical sensing allowed detection of food sources and changes in water composition. Mechanical sensing enabled response to water movement and sediment disturbance. These sensory systems supported survival by guiding movement and feeding behavior. Behavioral patterns included periodic movement across surfaces and settlement in suitable habitats for feeding and reproduction. Reproductive strategies in early mollusks included the release of eggs and sperm into marine water, where fertilization occurred externally. Some forms produced large numbers of eggs to increase survival probability of offspring. The development of larval stages allowed dispersal over wide marine areas. Reproductive cycles were influenced by environmental conditions such as temperature, nutrient availability, and water movement patterns. The evolution of early mollusks involved gradual development of body segmentation and internal organization changes. Organ systems became more specialized over time, supporting increased functional efficiency. The development of more complex digestive structures allowed processing of a wider range of food sources. Muscle organization improved movement control, allowing more precise interaction with environmental surfaces. Fossil evidence of early mollusks is preserved in sedimentary rock layers formed under marine conditions. These fossils include shell fragments, complete shell structures, and impressions of soft tissues. Preservation quality varies depending on sediment composition and burial conditions. Fine-grained sediments tend to preserve detailed structural features, while coarse sediments often preserve only partial remains. The presence of early mollusks contributed to changes in marine sediment composition. Shell material accumulated on sea floors, forming layers of calcium-rich deposits. These deposits influenced chemical conditions within sediments and affected other marine organisms living in the same environments. The accumulation of biological material played a role in long-term geological processes within marine basins. Early mollusk communities included multiple species occupying similar environments with different feeding and movement strategies. Some species remained attached to surfaces, while others moved actively across sediments. This variation in lifestyle supported distribution of ecological roles within marine systems. Resource use patterns among mollusks influenced population distribution across different habitats. The development of early mollusk diversity involved interactions between biological processes and environmental conditions. Genetic variation produced differences in body structure, while environmental factors influenced survival and reproduction. Over time, these interactions resulted in a wide range of mollusk forms occupying marine ecosystems. The expansion of mollusk diversity contributed to increasing biological complexity within ancient seas. Early mollusks also influenced the structure of marine food systems. They served as consumers of microbial and organic material and provided food for other marine organisms. Their presence supported energy flow within ecosystems and contributed to the stability of marine biological communities. Feeding activity by mollusks affected the distribution of organic material on seafloors and influenced nutrient recycling processes. The anatomical development of early mollusks included differentiation of head regions in some lineages. Sensory organs became more concentrated in anterior body regions, supporting improved environmental detection. The development of specialized feeding structures allowed more efficient processing of food sources. These anatomical changes supported expansion into new ecological roles within marine environments. Early mollusks continued to diversify as marine environments changed over geological time. Shifts in sea level, sediment deposition, and chemical conditions created new habitats for colonization. Mollusks adapted to these changes through modifications in shell structure, feeding behavior, and reproductive strategies. The persistence of mollusk lineages across different environmental conditions reflects their biological adaptability within marine systems. Some early mollusk forms developed protective behavioral strategies in response to environmental stress. These included burrowing into sediment layers and sealing shell openings during unfavorable conditions. Such behaviors reduced exposure to predators and environmental fluctuations. Burrowing activity also influenced sediment structure and contributed to mixing of organic and mineral materials. The internal physiology of early mollusks involved basic circulatory systems that transported nutrients and waste products within the body. Fluid movement supported metabolic processes and maintained internal stability. Respiratory exchange occurred through body surfaces or specialized structures in some forms. allowing oxygen absorption from surrounding water. Early mollusks exhibited a range of body sizes, with many remaining relatively small due to environmental constraints and biological limitations. Growth patterns were influenced by nutrient availability and environmental stability. Shell growth provided a record of developmental stages, with incremental layers indicating periods of biological activity and environmental change. During the Cambrian period, life in the oceans began to show many new ways of living, feeding, and interacting. One of the most important developments at this time was the rise of clear predator and prey relationships, where some organisms began to actively hunt other organisms, while others developed ways of avoiding being eaten. These interactions helped shape how living things survived in marine environments and influenced how early food chains formed and functioned. In the early parts of the Cambrian period, many organisms in the oceans were small, soft-bodied, and lived close to the seafloor or within the water column. Many of them fed on tiny particles of organic material, floating in the water or resting on sediments. This type of feeding was common because it required less movement and less specialized body parts. However, as time passed during the Cambrian period, some organisms developed stronger bodies, better movement abilities, and new feeding structures. These changes led to the appearance of active hunting behaviors in marine environments. Some of the earliest known predators in Cambrian seas were members of a group of animals often described as early arthropod relatives. These organisms developed hard outer coverings and jointed appendages that allowed them to move more efficiently through water and across the sea floor. They also developed structures that helped them capture or grasp other, small organisms. One well-known group included large swimming predators with frontal appendages that could extend forward to seize prey. These appendages were often segmented and could bend, allowing the animal to hold onto soft-bodied organisms. Once captured, prey could be directed towards the mouth for feeding. At the same time, many smaller organisms became the main sources of food for these predators. These included early mollusks, worms, small arthropods, and various soft-bodied animals that lived in marine sediments or floated in the water. Some of these prey organisms lived by filtering organic particles from the water, while others scraped food from surfaces or absorbed nutrients from their surroundings. Their small size and simple body structure made them easy targets for newly evolved predators. The interaction between predators and prey led to changes in behavior and body structure. Some prey organisms began to develop harder outer coverings. These coverings were made of minerals or tough organic materials that provided protection against attack. In some cases, shells or protective plates formed over soft body parts, making it more difficult for predators to access internal tissues. These protective features appeared in different groups of animals independently as predator activity increased in marine environments. Predators also developed more complex feeding structures during this time. Some organisms evolved stronger jaws or mouthparts that allowed them to break through protective coverings. Others developed grasping limbs or spines that helped them hold on to slippery prey. Certain predators developed flexible bodies that allowed quick movement through water or sediment, helping them catch organisms that tried to escape. These changes created a constant interaction between feeding methods and survival strategies in marine ecosystems. Early arthropod predators played a major role in shaping Cambrian marine life. Some of these animals had segmented bodies with swimming flaps along the sides that helped them move through water. These flaps could be moved in a wave-like motion to produce forward movement. Their heads often carried compound eyes, that allowed them to detect movement in the water. These visual systems helped them locate prey organisms even in environments where light conditions changed with depth or sediment presence. Prey organisms responded in different ways to the presence of these predators. Some began to live in deeper sediments, where they could hide more effectively. Others developed burrowing behavior, moving into soft seafloors to avoid detection. Some organisms reduced their movement during times when predators were active, while others developed rapid escape responses when disturbed. These behaviors became important survival methods in Cambrian marine ecosystems. Feeding interactions during this time were not limited to large predators and small prey. Many small organisms fed on even smaller particles, including microscopic organic matter and bacteria. These tiny feeders were an important part of the early marine environment because they helped recycle nutrients. Some organisms filtered water through small openings in their bodies, trapping particles that could be consumed. Others used cilia or small hair-like structures to move water and food particles toward feeding areas. As predator activity increased, the flow of energy through marine ecosystems became more structured. Organic material produced by living organisms or carried into the sea from other sources was consumed by small feeding organisms. These small organisms were then consumed by larger predators. In some cases, medium-sized predators were also consumed by even larger predators, creating multiple feeding levels within the same environment. These feeding relationships helped distribute energy through different types of organisms in Cambrian seas. The development of hard body parts among prey organisms had a strong influence on feeding success. Some predators adapted to crush or pierce hard coverings. Others focused on soft-bodied organisms that did not develop protective structures. This led to a variety of feeding strategies within predator groups. Some predators became specialized in hunting specific types of prey, while others remained general feeders that consumed whatever organisms they could capture. In sediment-rich environments, many prey organisms lived partially buried in the seafloor. These organisms often extended parts of their bodies into the water column to feed while keeping most of their bodies hidden. Predators that lived near or within sediments developed methods for detecting these hidden organisms. Some used sensory structures that detected vibrations in the water or sediment. Others relied on chemical detection to locate potential prey nearby. The Cambrian oceans also contained planktonic organisms that floated freely in the water. These organisms formed another important food source for predators. Some planktonic organisms were single-celled or simple multicellular forms that drifted with water currents. Predators that fed on plankton often developed filtering structures or small mouth openings that allowed them to capture tiny organisms from the water. These feeding methods required constant movement of water through the body or feeding structures. As feeding interactions became more complex, some organisms developed combined feeding strategies. Certain animals could feed on both suspended particles and small living organisms. Others shifted their feeding methods depending on environmental conditions or availability of food. This flexibility helped them survive in changing marine environments where food sources were not always evenly distributed. The presence of predators also influenced reproduction and growth patterns in many organisms. Some prey species began to produce large numbers of offspring to increase the chances of survival. Others developed life stages that were less vulnerable to predation, such as protective larval forms or hidden developmental stages within sediments. These life cycle changes helped maintain populations even under constant predation pressure. Some predators in Cambrian seas were capable of consuming prey much larger than small particles. These predators use strong grasping appendages to hold on to soft-bodied organisms while feeding. They often had flexible mouths or feeding openings that could expand to take in larger pieces of food. The ability to process larger prey allowed these predators to access energy sources that were not available to smaller feeders. In addition to active hunting, some Cambrian organisms engaged in scavenging behavior. Scavengers fed on dead or decaying organisms that had settled on the sea floor. This type of feeding played an important role in recycling organic material within marine environments. Scavengers often had strong sensory abilities that allowed them to locate dead organisms quickly. They also had feeding structures adapted for breaking down decaying tissues. Microorganisms played a central role in early Cambrian feeding relationships. Bacteria and other microscopic life forms broke down organic matter and made nutrients available for other organisms. Many small marine animals fed directly on these microorganisms or on the organic material they produced. This created a continuous flow of nutrients through different levels of marine life. Some early predators developed ambush feeding strategies. These organisms remained still in sediment or attached to surfaces until prey came close. Once a prey organism was within reach, the predator would quickly move to capture it. This type of feeding behavior required coordination between sensory detection and rapid movement. It also required energy conservation during periods of inactivity. Other predators relied on constant movement to find food. These organisms swam or crawled through marine environments searching for prey. Their bodies were often adapted for sustained movement, with structures that allowed efficient swimming or crawling along the sea floor. Continuous movement increased the chances of encountering prey organisms in open marine spaces. The distribution of feeding interactions also varied, depending on environmental conditions such as water depth, sediment type, and oxygen levels. In areas with abundant oxygen, more active organisms could survive and move freely. In areas with lower oxygen levels, slower moving or sediment-dwelling organisms were more common. These environmental differences influenced how feeding relationships developed in different parts of the Cambrian oceans. Some organisms developed protective behaviors that involved grouping together in certain areas. While not forming complex social structures, these groupings could reduce the likelihood of individual capture by predators. Dense populations of small organisms also created concentrated food sources for predators, influencing hunting activity in those regions. The early development of feeding interactions during the Cambrian period contributed to the establishment of structured energy flow in marine ecosystems. Organic matter moved from primary sources such as microscopic organisms to small feeders and then to larger predators. At each level, energy was transferred through consumption and digestion. This movement of energy supported a wide range of living organisms with different body structures and feeding methods. Some predators specialized in feeding on organisms with hard shells by using grinding or crushing mouthparts. These predators often had strong muscular systems that allowed them to apply force to protective coverings. Other predators developed needle-like structures that could pierce soft areas between protective plates. These different feeding methods allowed predators to access a wide variety of prey types. Prey organisms continued to develop new responses to predation. Some developed faster growth rates so they could reach safer sizes more quickly. Others developed camouflage, like coloration patterns that made them less noticeable in their environment. Some organisms lived in deeper sediment layers for most of their lives, only emerging briefly to feed or reproduce. The interaction between feeding strategies and survival methods continued to develop across Cambrian marine environments. Organisms at all levels of the feeding system played roles in transferring energy through ecosystems. Predators influenced prey behavior, while prey adaptations influenced predator feeding methods.